Hey guys, my name is Gareth and welcome back to my Finance Fitness YouTube channel where I break down personal finance, investments, stock markets, real estate and help people on their journey to financial freedom. So if that's something that interests you, make sure you subscribe to the channel. You can also click on the notification bell so you receive an alert whenever I upload a new video. Many have been calling for the end of the mighty US dollar and saying that it's going to be downhill from here. And this got me a bit concerned and wondering, can it be? And what should we be doing with our finances? The US dollar is the big brother when it comes to global currencies. And this really dates back all the way to World War II. After that war, all the currencies were totally destroyed and they needed to rebuild from scratch. Now the US was the biggest economy at that time and considered the most stable. So many countries agreed to peg their currency to the US dollar. What further increased the stability of the US dollar was that its value was pegged to the price of gold. And so as global trade grew, so did the influence of the US dollar. Fast forward to today, and over 50% of global trade takes place in US dollars. Yes, the US is the biggest economy in the world, but it only makes up around 15% of global economic output or GDP. And that percentage is actually declining as many other countries, especially emerging markets with higher growth rates, start to take up a bigger and bigger portion of the global economy. This includes countries like Ethiopia, Ghana, Bangladesh, Vietnam, and especially the two biggest ones, India and China. So if the US is only making up 15% of the global economy and declining, how is it possible that over 50% of international trade uses the US dollar? There are actually many things that are priced in US dollars. Things like oil, gold, silver, wheat, even coffee. All of these are priced in US dollars and traded around the world. The US dollar is also used as a store of value, making up around 60% of global foreign exchange reserves. And this is about 3 times as much as the next biggest currency, the euro, which is around 20%. Consider that the US population of around 330 million is less than the population of the European Union, which is around 450 million, even after the Brexit vote with the UK leaving. The US dollar is involved in over 90% of foreign exchange transactions around the world. And many countries have opted to either peg their currency to the US dollar so it doesn't fluctuate, or have adopted the US dollar as a legal tender in their country. And that means that you can just use it for everyday purchases. And here are some examples include Jordan, Lebanon, Panama, Bahamas, Turks and Caicos, and El Salvador. And some countries even temporarily would use the US dollar when they're trying to rebuild their economy after a big collapse. Here an example would be Zimbabwe. Around a decade ago, when their economy completely collapsed, they started using the US dollar to bring some stability. During 2009, around November, their inflation rate hit 89.7 sextillion%. And typed out, it looks like this. During this period, their currency weakened so much that at one point they were even printing 100 trillion Zimbabwe dollar notes. Many people from Zimbabwe fled to the neighboring South Africa, where I'm from. And I remember speaking to them about life in Zimbabwe during this period, where there were massive food and fuel shortages. And because the currency was so weak and inflation was so high, the food prices would be changing by the hour. You also had to stand in endless lines just to get some basic essentials every day. So the US dollar was brought into Zimbabwe to try and stabilize the markets and contain inflation. Many things may not be priced in US dollars, yet somehow the US dollar is used extensively in international trade. Let's say you're buying a machine from a company in South Africa and you want to take it to Canada. Well, the South African company may prefer to be paid in US dollars instead of the South African rand because it's much more stable. And so even though no American company was involved in this transaction, the US dollar was still used. And with this extensive use of the US dollar for global trade around the world, it gives the US government a lot of power. All US dollar payments, doesn't matter where it takes place in the world, has to pass through the US Federal Reserve. And so our example of the South African company getting paid dollars from a Canadian company, the money will flow via America before reaching the seller's bank account. Governments used to hold gold reserves as collateral for the currencies to make sure that it keeps the value. But then under the Nixon administration in 1971, the gold standard was ditched. And that meant that governments no longer had to hold these huge gold reserves in order to back the value of the currency that they were printing. And the value of the currency was no longer linked directly to the price of gold. And this is where the term fiat currencies came from, because the value of your currency was no longer linked to the value of the reserves backing it. And instead, the value of the currency was driven by demand and supply and the confidence that people had in the value of that currency. So what are some of the reasons why the US dollar could fall? Many countries around the world are looking to have a wider adoption of their currencies instead of the US dollar. And this will also reduce their reliance on the US dollar and being subjected to US regulations. More recently, there were some commodities like oil that's being priced in currencies other than the US dollar for the first time. For example, China has been changing the currency of their imported crude oil to that of their local currency instead. This would increase the demand for their currency and the usage in international trade, and slowly but surely start chipping away at the lead that the US dollar currently has. And with the US dollar considered a global reserve currency, this gave the Fed, or the Federal Reserve, the possibility to print money almost at will. And this is a massively powerful tool in financial markets, and not something available to every country like we saw in the case of Zimbabwe earlier on. But there may be a limit as to how much money the Fed can actually print, because we've seen over $3 trillion being added in the form of quantitative easing, or the Fed just printing more money in just the past 6 months, and this is by far the most we've ever seen. And there is this concern that with so much supply of dollars into the market, it could reduce the value of each of those dollars. And if we look at the US dollar compared to the euro recently, we see a significant weakness of the dollar. And one of the reasons could be, in part, due to the amount of money that the Fed is printing. Something that will likely affect the US dollar as well in coming months is the US election, which kicks off in November. The uncertainty of the outcome could have a big impact on the exchange rate. This is especially so if the outcome is different to what the financial markets had been expecting and pricing in. Just take a look at what happened to the British pound back in June 2016 when the UK voted on Brexit. Everybody was expecting, and the polls were indicating, that the UK would remain in the EU. But when the results came out and they decided to leave the EU, the currency was hit really hard. Many people are also starting to turn to new technologies like cryptocurrencies as a means of day-to-day payments. In particular, cryptocurrencies with more credibility, stability, and working with regulators could be really well positioned to take advantage of this. For example, Libra by Facebook. These cryptocurrency payments tend to be much faster and will be much more cost effective than conventional banking payments. Now, some of the reasons we mentioned earlier, like the printing of money and quantitative easing, is not limited to the US dollar, and we're seeing it as well for currencies like the pound, for the euro, and for the yen. The higher growth of countries like China may increase their currency adoption in global trade as well. But many Western nations may prefer not to adopt it as a reserve currency due to political reasons or concerns over property rights or free flow of information. So yes, slowly but surely over time, the US dollar influence may start to decrease a bit. But I don't think anybody's going to be ditching the US dollars anytime soon. So what can you do? Well, one of the things you could do is just to try and reduce the amount of dollar exposure that you have. And that could mean switching to currencies that may be considered more safe, like the Swiss franc, the euro, or the yen. You could also look for other stores of value like gold or silver. And as I mentioned earlier, more and more people are also starting to turn to cryptocurrencies. Guys, I finally also set up my Instagram account and I've started posting there, so make sure you follow me on Instagram. And that's it for the video today, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you next week. So our neighbors are doing construction work right across the road here, and they're busy tearing down a building, and you can probably hear it on the microphone, this constant drilling noise. That grrrr. Let me show you what I'm dealing with. That is the construction work that you constantly hearing in my videos. It's the most annoying thing ever. Busy tearing down this 7-story building, and every day, all day, all you hear is this bloody drilling. This is the longest a video has ever taken me to record.